All right, everybody, welcome into the Alabama Postgame Show brought to you by Medical Properties Trust. I'm Simone Eli alongside Matt Scalisi. Alabama fresh off a Week 2 win, a big one over Mercer, 48-14, the final score, which again looks good on paper, but maybe not everything going as smooth as it possibly could against a Mercer team that the Tide are heavily favored. They're favored by 57 points, but the stat sheet might be a little deceiving, Matt, and we just heard Nick Saban speak a second ago, not overly thrilled with some key parts of this game.
Let's say he's taking this opportunity to communicate in a very emotional way to his team. And again, this is not the first time we've seen him do this before.
Sure.
A lot of fans hate this kind of game, and I'm sure a lot of the players do too, because you're playing against a very strange offense that you're not going to see the rest of the year. You're playing against a team that the only possible way you could exceed expectations is to score 80 or something, which you're not going to do.
Yeah.
And you're very likely going to end up in the case of playing somebody like Mercer that runs a sort of wing tee, wishbone style of offense.
Yeah.
There's a pretty high risk of injuries to your defensive players, and we'll get into that in a minute.
Oh, we will.
So these are games that people that fans do not look forward to. But I think Saban, and I'm sure, look, he's not happy about a lot of stuff, genuinely. But I think he knows that a game like this is important for his team. I think he knows that when his team does not take practice seriously, which he's told us earlier this week that he did not think his team had a good week of practice, and the result is a very sloppy game by Alabama's standards, I think Saban knows he's got to make a point, and he's got to emphasize to them that while what you did today was good enough to beat Mercer 48-14. If you play this way against the better teams on our schedule, you're going to lose, and you're going to lose an opportunity to do all the stuff you came to Alabama to do. Yeah. So that's why I think we see him get very forceful, very emotional in post game. He started talking about growing up in West Virginia. That's when you know that he's
And the thing is, that's when you know he's not reaching. We'll get to the Willie Anderson thing in a second because I got a lot to say about that. But I would just sticking on this Saban situation. There are times that sometimes you're like, all right, coach, like I know you're trying to get some dudes fired up, but talk to them in the locker room because, we don't really buy what you're saying. Today, though, I think that it's, for the most part, I think you and I would agree with this and folks who watched the game, that it was a sloppy game. And like you said, it did get it done against Mercer, but would it get it done? Would that effort and that execution get it done a week from today against Florida? Will it do it down the road against Auburn or against a higher, caliber SEC program? And that's what he's trying to get across to these guys. Like you said, I think sometimes he's reaching. I don't think he's reaching today.
I mean, go back and look at a year ago, and I realize that this defense has grown a lot since then, but go back and look at that Ole Miss game. They needed every single possession to win that game. You could have no wasted offensive possessions. They kind of seemed careless on offense to start this game. They came out and didn't look like they were playing with urgency. Bryce Young, I mean, Saban's not going to blame Bryce Young, but he would say overall the offense did not execute well at all in the first few drives of this game. And they definitely didn't look like they had – if they had a plan, they didn't look like they were following it. So that's the kind of stuff, again, when you are playing an Ole Miss, when you're playing a team that has a very high-powered offense, every offensive possession has to count and mean a lot to you. And Alabama didn't look like they were treating their offensive possessions preciously when this game started. Now, it definitely got better as the game went on. They definitely started playing with more intensity. The offensive line looked like what we expected. The running backs all looked great today. But, I think just that general sloppiness on the first couple of drives frustrated. And then as the game went on, I think we started to see more and more from the defense as well of letting up, not playing with the same level of intensity and execution, which is what we saw last week against Miami. And I think Saban is really trying to make sure and get in these guys' heads that I need to see you guys do it for 4 quarters before I'm ready to believe that you can do what the previous teams in this program have done.
Yeah, and you see a comment we got a second ago, a quote from Saban. He said they're going to learn this week or they're going to get shook, and that
That's
is
right.
Coach just put it flat out there. Let's rip the Band-Aid off and talk about Will Anderson. Saban, I believe the latest that I saw said he was questionable. Obviously, he did not return to the game.
Questionable for Florida, yes.
Yeah, questionable. Okay. I started a little bit of controversy on social media with this, and I understand that this is the way that Mercer plays, that cut blocks are a thing, and that, their offense, I get all of that. Okay. At the end of the day, intent for me is pretty significant. And when you watch that play and you see the running back with a running start dive at Will Anderson's knee. Okay. First of all, it was pretty intentional over poorly executed. Okay. If the guy, if that's the offense that they run, that they are practice every single week in and week out, he knows how to properly execute that. And it was not done properly. It was not done safely. And it seemed very intentional, in my opinion, especially towards Alabama's best defensive player who has rocked this team for the most part of the game. And so for me, there's people arguing, yes, it's legal. It shouldn't be legal. I understand it shouldn't be legal because it's putting guys at risk. And that's why
if we've tried to remove targeting from the game, helmet hits from the game with a rule that a lot of people get annoyed about, why aren't we addressing the rule of taking guys' knees and ACLs out by removing this very dangerous thing that's become a part of the game?
Completely. And again, I think to me, if you go back and watch the actual play, the guy dives at his knee. There's no question as to where he's going at his knee, and it's Alabama's top defensive player. That's not coincidence to me, Matt.
I think my question about it would be, I do think he was intentionally trying to cut Will Anderson and cut his legs out from under him. The question is, was the intent genuinely to injure him, or was the intent to take him out of the play? Mm-hmm. And so I guess it's more of a question of, was he being malicious or was he being careless? Yeah. Right? Like, did he just not care whether he hurt him or not? And I look, the result is the same either way. You potentially hurt a guy who is a huge part of this team and has a big career ahead of him, more importantly. So, I think it's a bummer to see, and it's not the first time we've seen this either. And it does tend to happen in games like this.
Yeah.
So, Alabama has. I've seen a couple of people in here saying Alabama has no depth in terms of pass rushing experience. Experience-wise, I agree with that, but there are definitely some very talented players. Sure. You don't want to lose your best player, obviously, but Alabama's defense, even if Will Anderson is not able to play against Florida, it's still very, very good. It's still the best defense Florida will have faced all season. Yeah. So they may just have to do that. They may have to learn how to play without him this week. Mm-hmm. They'll probably have him for the rest of the season. The word out there right now from the folks reporting on this is that this does not seem to be a long-term injury. This doesn't seem to be as bad as we maybe feared it was right when it happened. Mm-hmm. So that's good news at least. But for the next week, I think a lot of people are going to be holding their breath.
Yeah, will be interesting to see. Sticking on the defensive side, Koolaid McKinnonstry out of Pinson Valley High School gets his first start and records an interception. He's a guy, fan favorite, covered him in high school. Matt, I know you have as well. But just a guy that I think that fans are super fired up about and have good reason to be. Good to see him do what he did today.
Yeah, we definitely knew that Saban liked what he saw from him in the preseason and talked him up and was very excited about him. And I think we saw why today. He was making a lot of plays on the ball. We did see a play late in the game. One of Mercer's 2 touchdowns came with McKinnonstry in coverage. But actually, if you were watching the broadcast, they sort of explained why it wasn't Koolaid McKinnonstry's fault. If you watch Saban right after the play, he wasn't yelling at McKinnonstry. He was yelling at the safety whose job it was to be over there. So overall, I think a really good game for McKinnonstry, and great that he got to have so much action so early in the season for this team. And the other guy that we started to see more of, and we talked about him in the pregame show today, was JoJo Earl on offense. Saban has been talking him up for quite a while, and we saw him get more involved. And looks like he has a high ceiling as a punt returner, indeed, which could be fun to watch as the season goes on.
I think this is an interesting topic that I'm seeing over in the comments right now. A discussion as to whether Georgia should jump to be the number one in the country over Alabama. After
I know why some Bama fans want that. I think some of you guys hate being number one, and you feel like it puts the target on you. But I have to say, I mean, look, Georgia did look good today against UAB, and they obviously now we know they have two very good quarterbacks. But I still don't think they should jump Alabama at this point. I think they need to get into SEC play before we really start reconsidering anybody. Let's see Alabama go up against a good team in Florida next week. Let's see Georgia get into SEC play and see what they're made of, and then we can reassess. But I'm not a big fan of moving undefeated teams around in the rankings this early.
Agree. And from my opinion on this is that it's Alabama's top spot to lose and not someone else's to gain. The title of the defending national champs. I'm not just saying this on this platform because there's Bama fans watching it. I truly believe this. I think that until Bama slips up, if it ever happens, that's when they drop. But I don't think that there's much that anyone else can do. I mean, Georgia beat Clemson in week 1 that would force a team to overtake the top spot from the defending national champs who went undefeated in the COVID year and all that stuff.
So you're a believer in the like wrestling belt version of this, where somebody has to beat you to take it, to take
exactly.
number one. Yeah,
exactly, no doubt. All right, going into week 3, we will see finally, hopefully, maybe a legitimate. Not that Miami wasn't a legitimate contender. It's not like it was Auburn where they had back-to-back just gimmies, but Alabama going to be up against Florida this week. Matt, the biggest thing outside of effort, cleaning some things up, but what would you say Nick Saban is looking for in terms of preparation going into this Gators game?
Well, I think you got to see the offense developing some more consistency. I think even though Bryce Young has done really good and really impressive things 2 weeks in a row, I think on a series to series basis is not very consistent yet. And we still are seeing him, I think, have some communication issues with his receivers. They just aren't always on the same page. The plays are sometimes more improvised than I think we've been used to seeing under the last couple of quarterbacks. And that should improve with time and experience, but they're not quite there yet. And I think he wants to feel more secure about Bryce's understanding of the offense. The other thing that I think you want to see going into this game is Alabama's defense really has a challenge ahead of them here. They're going to be going up against two. I mean, they're going to play both of Florida's quarterbacks. Florida is for people who haven't followed, Florida has been in a situation where they have two quarterbacks who are, even though technically one of them is the starter in Emory Jones, there is another guy right behind him at this point that a lot of folks believe is going to ultimately take that job, and this may be the game where it happens. So they've got contrasting styles. They're going to have to watch film on two different quarterbacks, essentially two different offenses that they're going to have to be ready for. And we know, even though Florida lost a lot of guys last year, we know how this program has recruited. We know that there's a ton of talent on this team. So this is going to be a tough, just individual matchups all over the field are going to be a big challenge for Alabama.
Yeah, if we can quick, I'm kind of throwing this one out at you quick, but I want to take a look around the SEC. There was one game that kind of popped out to me, and I understand that Texas A&M had a significant injury, but Texas A&M, the 5th-ranked team in the country, pulls out a 10-7 win over Colorado. Just one of the many scores we talked going into this day about the kind of the bizarre schedule that we were seeing throughout the entire SEC, not in conference play yet, but that one was a little surprising to me.
Honestly, another good moment for the Pac-12 after beating Oregon today, after Oregon beating Ohio State today. So maybe the Pac-12 is kind of having an up year at this point. I also think the big thing to watch for the rest of the night in the SEC at this point is this Texas Arkansas game. Arkansas is currently up 13-0, and they have the ball
Shocking.
on Texas. I mean, they are we've been hearing for years now that Sam Pittman has got Arkansas going in the right direction.
Yeah.
Maybe he's finally done it. Maybe Arkansas is worth taking a lot more seriously than I did coming into this year. So they're looking pretty good right now. Their defense is shutting out this very talented Texas team, and their offense is not spectacular at this point, but they're looking pretty good. And that this quarterback that they have is very mobile and very difficult to defend.
Yeah. Well, a little bit of a trap week for a lot of SEC teams, not for Alabama. They get it done against Mercer, not a perfect game, but I think one encouraging thing is some special teams plays. We saw the punt blocks return for touchdown to start the game. I think that's significant in terms of things that are positive to see going into an SEC schedule. You really want to see all phases of the game, the Tide dominant and throughout the entire game in different spots. But I think that special teams win you games in this conference. There's no question about that, Matt. We've seen it time and time again. They'll win you games, they'll lose you games. So a small positive and kind of a rougher start for Bama in this game against Mercer.
Yeah, I think overall kind of a mix of things. I think we saw a team that wasn't taking their opponent super seriously come out and play like it and play a little sloppy. We saw them bounce back from that and figure it out as the game went on. And then later in the game, I think what we saw were some backups who were not ready for prime time yet and have some more work to do as the season goes. So, look, not as much fun to watch probably as it was last week, but a necessary step for any team in the development process. And next week will be a big step too.
It certainly will. A big old road trip to Florida. We'll have potentially a top 10 matchup. Go ahead, man.
I'm sorry. I just wanted to bring up Lee Brown's point that Tennessee also lost. So yes, they did lose to Pitt.
They weren't favored in that game, right?
They were not. They were underdogs, and they did lose. So
yes. A crazy start to the college football season already. Ohio State goes down. The Pac-12 is back, ? We'll see. I don't know, but Alabama gets it done. The Tide 2-0 with a big 48-14 win over Mercer. It's Florida week officially. Nick Saban, I'm glad I don't play for the Tide on Monday because I don't want to be at practice. But regardless, some things to clean up. But Bama gets it done this week. They are 2-0, head into week 3 of the season as expected. Thanks so much for tuning in. The Alabama Postgame Show brought to you by Medical Properties Trust. For Matt Scalisi, I'm Simone. Have a good night.
Medical Properties Trust, at the very heart